some years back and spoke at Indiana University. I was in that crowd, and I was humbled by the words he said that day. It moved me. I wrote about it in my local newsletter, and I appreciate you, and it's an honor. I can't even believe for me to be standing here in front of you right now, my brother. You know, the city of Chicago holds a special place in the labor movement, past and present. It's the home of the mighty Local 551. Home of the Explorer, and there's a relevance to that vehicle because, as everybody knows now, we're exploring a new way of doing things in the UAW. And I can't speak here today without recognizing our UAW family at Belvedere. That's what we're here today. That's what it's all about. That's what this fight's about. And we cannot ever come to Chicago and talk about labor without looking at the relevance and recognizing the Haymarket martyrs. 137 years ago, thousands of workers in this city were on strike, just like our UAW members today. They came under violent attack, as so many workers in this country have faced. Several of their leaders made the ultimate sacrifice, giving their lives to the cause of labor. And we shouldn't forget what those Haymarket martyrs were fighting for.
8-hour day.
The 8-hour day. They were fighting for their lives. They were fighting for their time. They were cut down in pursuit of a radical idea that our lives belong to us, that our time belongs to us. Even working class people deserve a quality of life that doesn't revolve around work. And we all know today, not much has changed because the fight to reclaim our lives is not over. But at that time, it was totally unthinkable. The idea of 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for recreation. They were laughed at, they were mocked, and they were ridiculed for fighting for such a crazy thing. And you know what? We at the UAW today are being ridiculed and mocked for our demands too. But the CEOs and the cronies forget about the working class, and they forget about one thing. We've got the power. You know, Walter Reuther once said, power is the ability of a labor union like the UAW to make the most powerful corporation in the world, at that time General Motors, say yes when it wants to say no. Well, yesterday, with the strength of the stand-up strike, we did exactly that. For months, they said a just transition with the EV industry was impossible. That workers who make engines and transmissions were going to be left behind in a green economy. And we said, hell no! They said they didn't have to negotiate over electric vehicle battery plants. And when we launched our stand-up strike, we've outsmarted, we've outorganized corporate America, and we want a future for tens of thousands of workers. And we're going to keep going until we win social and economic justice at the Big Three and beyond. It's an honor of mine to stand here today with these dynamic leaders. And let me tell you, as I say over and over, this isn't just the UAW's fight. It's everybody's fight. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're a union. It doesn't matter if you're non-union. It doesn't matter. We all have the same thing. We all go through the same issues. I've been there. I've lived it, and I've bled the ground, and we all have. It doesn't matter if you're a teacher. It doesn't matter if you're an airline attendant. It doesn't matter if you're an auto worker. It doesn't matter if you work at Starbucks. It doesn't matter if you work at McDonald's or Walmart. We're all the same, and we're being left behind. I'm also reminded that though we're in Chicago, we're just a few miles or so from my home state of Indiana. And I'm reminded of my roots as a UAW member and as a member of the working class. My grandparents came from the South up to Indiana during the Great Depression. My grandfather hired in Chrysler in 1937, the year the UAW organized Chrysler. And those of you that don't know, I carry a check stub of his every day I go to work. I carry that check stub as a reminder of where we come from and where we need to go and the battle that's left to fight. My roots are in the economic migrants from the South who left behind destitution and came north to find a better life. And they found it because of organized labor. And today when people want to bash our neighbors to the south, and they want to talk about building walls, when I look at those people, when I see economic migrants from Mexico and Central America, or any place, I don't see a stranger to be excluded or rejected. I see destitute human beings in search of a better life. I see a world that needs to be organized. I see my own grandparents, and the only difference between those people and my grandparents is that my grandparents were lucky enough to be born in America. That's it. Destitution does not know border lines. I want to recognize some of our special guests that joined us today. Local 551, President Chris Bean, thank you so much, brother, for leading the fight. Vice President Jason Wachowski, Wacko, and Chairman Kofi Millinder. I want to thank Regional Director Brandon Campbell for helping us in his leadership in reaching forward. And I want to thank Tom Long, Chairperson of the KMU from the Philippines. Corporate greed doesn't know boundaries, it doesn't recognize borders, and that's why it's so critical that we don't just unite as a union, and unite as labor, and unite as working class, and unite as a country. We have to unite as a global working class to fight for justice and equality. An attack on workers anywhere is an attack on workers everywhere. I'm honored to share the stage with Chicago's Teachers Union President, Stacey Davis Gates. I'll tell you what, watching her speak, I almost want to just get back in the truck and take off, because that's a hard one to keep up with. The CTU revived the strike and sparked a movement that spread across this country. By reforming their union and taking on the boss, the CTU inspired educators across the country to mount the biggest strike ever for decades. And that's exactly the kind of action and leadership we need. We need to inspire the working class of this country. I'm honored to share the stage with AFA President Sarah Nelson. shown that there's a different way to lead a national union in this country. You can be loud and proud, and you can inspire and challenge the status quo. You can say the word strike. President Nelson was the architect of the chaos strike with AFA in the 90s. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need, and we're going to need to organize the working class in this country. And I'm honored to have been able to share the stage with Chicago's Mayor Brandon Johnson. He's shown that the union movement doesn't end at the workplace. We need a political movement that can take the principles of unionism into the streets, into City Hall, and beyond. That's the kind of vision we're going to need to empower the working class of this country. Now, through the UAW, great leaders in American history, such as Walter Reuther, Dr. Martin Luther King, and our brother Jesse Jackson, who's here with us today. They laid out plans for a future that many only dreamed of before. And today we find ourselves in familiar territory. The UAW holds a historic place in our nation's history. And just one example of that, one great example of that is how we came together, and we've been together ever since that time with the Civil Rights Movement. Both of our movements are inextricably intertwined. As one movement goes, the other's going to go. If labor does bad, the civil rights movement struggles too. And if they struggle, we struggle. And it's no coincidence. As worker rights went backwards, we've seen attack on voting rights laws and everything else going on. It's got to win. You know, another example was when our democracy was threatened during World War II. UAW members were essential in building Jeeps, in building tanks right here, and the B-24 Liberator bombers. That was called the arsenal of democracy. And that democracy, that arsenal of democracy was a vision of UAW President Walter Reuther. He had the vision of converting the excess capacity of our auto plants at that time and able to make us be able to build a movement where we could produce airplanes and tanks and all those things without having to build new factories because we didn't have time to do it. And the sad irony of that is, just as today, you know, we don't have any respect from the boss class, from the CEO class, and the corporate class. And when Walter Reuther presented that idea back in the day, he was laughed at and mocked by the big three CEOs, who basically told him, let us handle the car business, you stay in your lane. But the reality of it was, when Pearl Harbor happened, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt went to Walter Reuther and they adopted that plan. And we don't get credit for that today. President Reuther's arsenal of democracy, and which was employed by FDR and built by our labor, is what was one of the main integral pieces of us winning that war. And after the war, American workers found themselves in a situation that parallels where we find ourselves today. During the war, inflation had soared, leaving pay increases meaningless. And the UAW was fighting at that time, after the war, for a 30% increase in wages. In arguing for those increases, President Reuther stated at that time, and think about this because it applies exactly to today, his exact words at that time were, the economic facts of life prove wages can be increased without increasing prices. Increased production must be supported by an increase in wages, and it's only possible through an increase in wages. The industry can pay higher wages out of the high profits it's making. Sound familiar? These auto companies could double the price, they could double our wages and not raise the price of vehicles, and they would still make billions in profits, but they refuse to do it. The UAW workers at that time ended up getting an 18.5% increase over the course of that agreement. And today, we're in almost exactly the same situation. Record profits, high inflation, which has rendered our pay increases meaningless, and the companies can afford to raise wages without increasing the price of vehicles. Just like 80 years ago, today, our union is again building the arsenal of democracy. But this war is not against some foreign power. The front lines are right here in our homes. It's a class war on humanity. It's a war of the working class versus the billionaire class and corporate greed. And we are the arsenal for democracy. The workers are the liberators, and the strike is our vehicle for liberation. Today's about the fabric of the working class, and the auto workers are a big piece of that. We all, the working class, we're the ones that make the world run. Not the billionaire class, but the working class of the billions. We've been left behind. It's not some executive that owns our future. We own the future. Working class people from all walks of life. It's what we decide to do together that will shape the future that we leave for the next generation. And that's an economic reality that these corporate executives don't want to acknowledge. I believe we're at a turning point in America, and this is a defining moment for this nation. Nearly 4 out of 5 Americans stand with us and support the stand-up strike as it keeps growing. Over the last decade, the Big Three have made $250 billion in profits. In the last 6 months alone, they've made over $21 billion in profits. And the workers have been left behind. In the economy of the Big Three and the corporate class, the CEOs get everything, and the workers get left behind. In their economy, workers live paycheck to paycheck, while the CEOs buy another mansion. In their economy, we make all the sacrifice, and they take all the profit. They want to use scare tactics, saying we're going to wreck the economy. But we're not going to wreck the economy. We're going to wreck their economy. That economy only works for one group of people. It doesn't work for the working class. It's time we end it. Their economy is cruel. Their economy has no regard for humanity. And we've seen it. We've seen the result of it as the great chasm between the rich and the poor has grown to an enormous disparity over the last 40 years. It's time we return to the founders of this nation's intent of working toward the common good and the public good. I want to talk a little bit of history with you because it's imperative we understand where we come from. And it's not changed a whole lot in the entire history of this nation. In essay number 45 of the Federalist Papers, founders Alexander Hamilton and James Madison stated, "It is too early for politicians to presume on our forgetting that the public good, the real welfare of the great body of the people, is the supreme object to be pursued." and that no form of government whatever has any other value than as it may be fitted for the attainment of this object. President FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, acknowledged this principle in his advocacy for a living wage. In his 1933 address, following the passage of the National Industrial Recovery Act, President Roosevelt stated, "It seems to me to be equally plain that no business which depends for existence on paying less than a living wage to its workers has any right to continue in this country." By business, I mean the whole of commerce as well as the whole of industry. And by workers, I mean all workers, the white collar class as well as the people in overalls. And by living wages, I mean more than a bare subsistence level. I mean the wages of a decent living. You know, the parallel conversation between the founders and over 100 years later, President Roosevelt, and 90 years later to today are not by accident. Today we see a federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour. That's not even a bare subsistence level. And it's sure as hell not a wage that provides for a decent living. The corporate and billionaire class has led the public to believe the minimum wage is for teenagers in summer jobs. That was not the intent of the minimum wage. The intent was exactly as FDR stated, to be the floor that we set to provide a decent living. And in the words of Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress.
I already read the whole thing.
UAW family, it's our mission to turn the system of corporate greed upside down. That's what we're fighting for with our stand-up strike. When we stand together united in the cause of economic and social justice, there's nothing that we can't do, and there's no mountain that we can't move. Our solidarity is the solution to the problem that we face as a nation and as a world. When working class people stand up, when working class people fight for economic and social justice, when working class people go on strike, we can put an end to the race to the bottom. We can stop the struggle living paycheck to paycheck. We can take our lives back. We can take our time back. And we can build an economy that works for the working class and for all of humanity. UAW family, this is our generation's defining moment. And it's time for the working class to stand up and stand together. And when we stand up, the entire working class wins. Let's get to it. Thank you.
We want to get a group picture. If you can face the cameras, turn around. This is what solidarity looks like.